please. We have really just one policy on the agenda this evening. As you can see that Kelly's pulled up on the screen. Thank you very much. Kelly, could you just do me one favor and make sure that when the policies get opened, that we're at 125% viewing for everybody?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. I will be happy to turn this over to you, Kelly, and to Mike as well for any input he may have on policies 3320 and 3323 that will replace our existing policy.
Sure. So thank you, everyone. As you can see from the agenda, we are going to move away a little bit from the student series 5,000 and into the 3,000 series, which are our financing and budget policies. And these are two policies that are important to get into place as we start the next fiscal year. So currently we have this policy 3323. And to update this one effectively, there is a new policy 3320, as well as a revision to 3323. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Mike as we go into the first policy, which is purchasing procedures, and have him do a brief overview for you guys on what the policy entails, and then we'll certainly open it up to any questions.
Thanks. So the first policy, 3320, in short, is business and non-instructional operations purchasing procedures. This is just outlining that the purchases, the system for making purchases is going to be through Dr. Casimiro and myself, making sure that all of the regulations that are in the other policies, as well as any restrictions that grants any state or local funding sources have, as well as federal purchasing guidelines, which largely don't apply to the general fund, but are more so for our grants funds.
Here in front of you, this first policy really outlines the authority of both the superintendent and the chief financial officer, and overviews the purchasing systems that are established, that we have to buy proper products for the purposes intended, which in our organization will be educational, that products have to be available when we need them, that we buy the proper amount of a product, and that we pay what is a fair or proper price. And so this is kind of the overview or the shell for the follow-up financial policies that are to follow. So I don't know if there's any particular questions, but I think now would be a good time to ask.
Go ahead, Terry.
Is the school system subject to the limits that City Hall imposes on purchases over a certain amount, that has to go through a committee, or you just have approval, without that step?
Our purchasing and procurement doesn't go through the city. The city has their own purchasing and procurement. They actually have a special office run by Dick Volpe, I believe his name is. Ours is separate from that, but our idea is to adhere to the strictest of the guidance, whether that be city, state, or federal.
And that will be more specific to the next policy that we overview, Teresa. The next
Okay.
outlines some of the specific cost requirements.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? I do want to just point out the obvious here, which is that this former policy, which was passed in 1999, is now splitting into two separate policies. And it definitely gets much more specific than the previous version that we have. So I think it provides some much stronger guidance to the finance team and to the superintendent as far as, what protocols are supposed to follow. Any feedback from non-committee members? Okay. Seeing none, I will ask for first recommendation to the full board for first read of policy 3323, soliciting sorry, we're looking at 3320. My apologies.
I apologize.
33, that's okay.
No,
I was
she
jumping
did do
ahead.
2-3. I thought she said was 2-3.
Nope. There's both. We started with 3320. We'll go to 3323 next. So this one that you just looked at is 3320.
Okay, all right. I make a motion to accept for first read 3320 as revised.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Al. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion so carries. All right, thank you very much. And now we will move on to 3323, soliciting prices and bidding requirements.
So this next policy talks a little bit about how we go about the bidding process, as well as the need for multiple quotes. And it does reference, you will see here, the previous policy in its contents. So I will turn over to Mike to go through the specific details.
So I think the first thing to note is of importance is that first paragraph where we actually have the dollar values listed. 15,000 is the amount you're going to want to look at, and 25,000. So I'm just going to read it. All contracts for purchases of supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services in the amount of 15,000 or more shall be based, when possible, on at least 2 competitive bids. So anything 15,000 or more will require 2 bids. Anything over the next threshold amount, 25,000, will require 3. There are, in the next paragraph, you'll see there are some exceptions for professional services. Professional services are any services performed by a profession, right? So any consultants, attorneys, accountants, doctors, to the extent that we have those. And the other exception is if it is a sole source vendor. So if there is a vendor and they're the only vendor for a particular item, which, believe it or not, does happen from time to time, that is also an exception. In that case, and we had one recently, what we do is we ask the vendor to supply us with a sole source letter, and that sole source letter is the vendor just saying that, yes, I am acknowledging that I am the only vendor. And then in turn, for audit purposes, we or I would also prepare a sole source letter, and that's the letter that the auditors are looking for, is the letter from me saying, yes, we had an exception to our policy because it was a sole source vendor.
So an example I can give is sometimes we will have a child that requires a specific technological device, maybe as a communication device, and there may be one vendor that makes that product. So if we know that there's only one vendor that produces that item, we are not going to go out to bid because there are not other vendors that we could get a competitive price from. So this acknowledges that there are instances and circumstances in which that occurs, but we have to show and prove that in fact only one company makes that exclusive item.
And then you'll notice the very next paragraph is just talking about the third exception, and that's if the vendor is on the Connecticut vendor list. It's already been vetted through the state, then it does not require competitive quotes. And then, of course, all of that flows through, as I said before, the superintendent and myself were our designees.
The vendor list, who puts that out?
The state of Connecticut.
What department?
Do you want to describe that a little further?
I haven't looked at it in quite a bit, but you can search for, I can share the link. I have it on my desktop.
No, it was just, I was wondering, did it come from the Board of Ed? I mean, the State Department of
State
Education?
Department of Ed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it's the Department of Education. I think it's the
Or
purchase.
statewide? Okay.
DAS, it's the
Right.
DAS website. I was still trying to find it.
Or I was just curious.
It's a clunky site to navigate. We can certainly share that out. You'll see what I mean by that. But basically, it's kind of a marketplace where people compete for competitive bids, and it's a way to assure statewide that the vendors have been approved, they've been vetted, they have a reputation, but also that their prices by volume are and service are competitive and are generally safe to use and have been vetted to some degree. Doesn't always mean that they're cheaper, ironically. It just means that they have been vetted. So those are different things that we look for. Sometimes you can place a bid. I don't want to overcomplicate things, but someone can fulfill it in 2 weeks. You need it before the end of the school year or by the start of the school year. Another vendor might not be able to do that. So even though the price is different, you might choose a different vendor for a specific reason. But the Connecticut vendor list is anybody who's already been sort of put through the paces of those qualifications.
The reason I ask, because the library, through the state library, they have vendor lists that are competitive. And I was just wondering, it's too bad the education department doesn't do something similar. That's all. That's where I was coming from.
No, I agree, Terry. It's a very clunky process. There are also consortiums that
Yeah.
are a part of, but that you still need to go through a bid process. But it would be wonderful down the line, and maybe someday we can do this, but where we kind of already create our own internal list that these are the 10 vendors that Mike Weaver has vetted as, our own internal, and our policy reflects that, and that gets updated on an annual basis and approved by the superintendent. But
Sounds good.
yeah,
Sounds
right
good.
now we're just trying to get to the July 1st and start fresh with some parameters in place for everybody for July 1st. So
Good job. Good job. Thank you.
So if we're continuing on, the next paragraph references the previous policy that you just looked at, basically saying we have to follow the bidding procedures, including availability of items, are they the right quantity of items, and so forth when securing a product. Here, and I do think we should add, as I'm looking at this again, is when bidding procedures are used, we should add something here that says in excess of 25,000. These are larger bids, like when we go out for our school lunch bid or special education transportation services, that we appropriately post them and that there's a secure bidding process for them. So this part is referencing those larger contracts that we have to have fair bidding practices for, with due dates and timelines. And there are the availability of vendors to tell us, I want to be placed on that list when you go out to bid, for example, school lunch, special ed transportation. I want to be on that list to be able to submit my competitive bid.
Let me ask a question here. You referenced the 25,000 because that's a circumstance where we know we're likely to have to do that. But the previous policy mentions the amounts over 15,000 requiring or aiming to use at least 2 bids. So I just want to sort of ask some clarifying language at the front of this policy here, where it says when possible on at least 2 competitive grants. So are the exceptions for that the ones that are listed right below, and those are the only situations in which you would not it would not be possible to get the 2 bids in? Is that correct?
Yes. I made reference before. There are times where either state, local, or federal, or even on a grant level might have a different number stipulated. So for example, federal purchasing, the limit is set to 10,000 for any, I believe they call it a micro purchase. So in that case, if something were to flow through to our grants coordinator and they were to notice that it was on a federally funded grant, then that 10,000 would be subject.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Kelly and Mike, I just was looking at it here and I thought I saw, but it might have been in another policy that we were reviewing in preparation for this. Is there an exception for an emergency with superintendent, like an emergency authorization where we have a break of some sort of a water main break? I don't know what it is. We need to bring ServPro in here immediately or something along those lines. We don't have time to go out and get bids and stuff. Is there language on this one. I thought I read it in another one, but I forgot about it.
There, in this policy, there's not, but in other policies, it does defer to the superintendent in those types of situations, emergency situations. I think it doesn't hurt to also include it in here if we wanted to.
Okay, maybe just a line for emergencies or something.
So going back to the area, Kelly, that you were talking about inserting. Sorry, I see you're typing there.
This-
I'm just putting something in here. We can massage the language, but just for talking points.
Back to the area that you were mentioning here, where when bidding procedures are used in excess of $25,000, can you help me just process why $25,000 is the marker versus 15?
I think that was, the 25,000 was just where it says note, it references the Connecticut General Statute, 7-148. I think that.
And they're talking about the sealed bidding. Okay,
Yeah,
so that's the bidding procedure we're talking about. Okay.
yeah, and Kelly referenced the transportation. We also just went through this with the school lunch process. It was a sealed bid.
So these
Okay.
bidding procedures, and again, if we want to say, like sealed bidding procedures, we could, but this is really meant for those larger contracts that go into place for a longer duration. This is not talking about the textbooks that we're purchasing that are, 10,000, 15,000, or even 25,000.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the explanation.
Well, thinking of textbooks, what do you do with your old textbooks?
So
Sarah, I'll let you.
yeah, we're doing some house cleaning now. So it depends on the book, Terry. For a while, we used to be able to sell them back. There was a company that would
Yeah.
buy them back, and they wouldn't give you much, but it was we did due diligence on it. We always made sure that we checked the ISBN numbers to make sure that there was no value left. So once there's those companies have recently disappeared with the surge of digital textbooks, right? So now what we do is as textbooks become obsolete and we make sure that there's no value to the book at all, then we just make a recording of, if we have 100 US history books from 1972, and here's the title and the ISBN, we just jot that down that they're discarded. We write discard on them, and then we ask 100 people if they want them, take them home. We send them home with kids, but they usually will get discarded if no one else wants them. But go ahead.
We have a recycle company that'll just give you, I believe, for scrap value. If
Oh.
you want me to pass that along, you're right.
Yeah.
These companies are disappearing,
Yeah.
and we have a hard time because the friends of the library get the monies that we. So I don't know how much it is, but they do pick it up. They're out of Massachusetts.
Yep.
I could send you the name, and maybe that could help you. with-
Definitely, I would welcome that. We're always looking for
Yeah.
take care of it.
The other thing, if I could just add, and Mike just reminded me, this will come up as you continue to go through your Series 3000. There is a reference to discarding of materials such as textbooks in a later policy.
Thank
So we
you.
can certainly revise it. We'll take the information now for sure, but we can certainly add additional language if we feel needed at that time. Are there any additional questions regarding this policy 3323?
I have one more question. Sorry, this is not my committee.
Sure.
No,
I'm just thinking of it now. Mike, does this apply to school activity accounts? I keep I get that question. They people know that we were working on this, and they're
I've actually heard both yes and no.
oh,
My position on it was no, that this refers to only monies that were either A, coming in through a grant or appropriated through the city.
okay. We'll just have to be clear about that because you know, which one this applies to. I don't know if we need to outline it here or just that's more of a me communication, which I can certainly handle.
So there's no policies for clubs?
There is.
We do have a rather policy and procedure manual for student activity accounts in light of the recent history. You can share those definitely.
I thought that we had copies of those distributed to us at one point when this conversation came forward.
Most
I
likely.
seem to remember Ed Aram, I think.
Yeah,
passed them
did that
to us.
early on. Yeah.
Yeah. So any other questions on this policy? Any questions from committee members or non-committee members about this policy?
No, just a comment. I think it's very self-explanatory and that we need to, push it on so we can have it in place.
Yeah.
I agree.
The only other thought that I had, if it made it as we added more things under the exceptions, if it makes it easier to read, we could list them. There are 4 different exceptions. I could put a colon and just 1, 2, 3, 4, if that makes it easier. Just a
I
thought.
think that's a good idea, Kelly, yeah.
Yeah. Like that.
Sure. Anything to make it easy.
I'll clean up the actual formatting, but it would look like this.
Yeah, that's better.
I think we can get rid of some of the additionally when we do the numbers. Does that look okay to everyone?
I like that.
Mhm.
Much better.
Sure. Are there any questions about any of the other highlighted additions that we made just during our discussion?
See any? In that case, I'll call for motion to recommend for first read to the full board for policy number 3323, soliciting prices and bidding requirements. Thank you, Terry. Is there a second, please? Is there a second on this motion, please?
Second.
Thank you, Juanita. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any abstentions?
No.
Any nays? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Before we wrap up, I just want to acknowledge that this policy that we just reviewed, which is specific to our financial practices, was done to make it a little bit easier as we head into the next fiscal year. It is my hope that as we get into September, we are obviously in the middle of the 5,000 series right now, but I would like to bring forward some of the other financial policies in this 3,000 series so that we can continue to make sure we're doing our work on this end and keeping all of those policies as updated and precise as possible. That's also going to ensure that we carry forward good practices and keep on a good path as far as our audits and our financial reporting is concerned. So just bringing that forward to you folks now, since hopefully in the fall you'll all be joining us for future meetings. Any questions or concerns?
I would just like to thank Kelly, Mike, Superintendent, and you for pulling this meeting together, because Kelly and I had talked about it, and we're trying to get this through before we go on vacation at the end of June. So I really thank you, Kelly, for working with the schedule. We know that we have a tight schedule until the end of this month. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Appreciate
Thank
the
Appreciate
you.
everybody's
diversion.
participation. Yep, so that we can get both reads in before the end of the year. So thank you.
Just to
Thank
give a
you.
little foreshadowing, there's about 20 policies that need to be updated within the 3000 series that we need to review and update, and a few for consideration. So probably 3 to 4 meetings, depending on, you know, how detailed each individual policy goes. In the fall, we should be able to work our way through the 3000 series.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Sure.
Any questions or comments from committee members? Or anyone else on the meeting? All right. Well, thank you all for your time this evening. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you, Terry. May I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.